VisJS configuration system works. Let's wait to see if it's streaming. I think I'll go over the source code first, and then I'll go over the flowchart that I did here. It was easier than I thought to understand. So the way that it works is it accepts options here. The network accepts options. Maybe I should go in the beginning. So yeah, here. And these options here are going to be these ones. And then based on this filter function, so it's going to check to see if the configure key exists on the options. And if it exists, then it's going to initialize the configurator, which is the class that they use to set up the... Maybe I should show here. It's this part here. These things that are going to change the visualization based on the input. So this filter function is going to be the one that decides which elements are shown. So here you have the edges and the physics, and then I think you can put more stuff here like layout and interaction and other things like that if you put them on the inside this filter here. So if returns true, then the part is gonna be there, I think. This part I haven't dived too deep into, so because the part that I was more curious about is the how they change the visualizations and how do they build the elements on the customization component. So it's here that it initializes the configurator, which comes from VisUtils library, which is another library separated from the network library that they use to build this stuff. And it's this file here on this repository. This VisJS VisUtils. And then this function sets up the options in the first place. Maybe now is better to go over the SkyDraw stuff that I did. So this class is going to be this one. And it initializes with these attributes here. And then it's going to call this right away. It sets the options that it has from the configure. So there's two different types of options. Can be a little bit confusing, I think. There's the options that it receives in the first place, which is this one, this object here. And then there's other options that it sets later, which are the module options, which comes from this object here. And this has all the options from all different modules that they use. So I think I'm going to show on the SkyDraw now. So the first one that it calls is this one, which I haven't spent a bunch of time, I think, looking at what it does. But here it cleans the elements. So this is one thing that I learned is that every time that you change some configuration here, the elements each one of these elements are removed and added again each time. And I think this is the reason why if you put like here, you can go a lot lower than the limit that they put there is, because the range that they put is a lot smaller. I think it's like minus 20,000 or something like that, but you can go forever here. I think the reason why is because it creates another instance of this. It removes each time, and it's because of the way that it works there, the way that they update everything. So I'm going to show here, and then I'll go back to the code here. But right after they call this function, they're going to call this one. And this one is the one that has this create function, which initializes everything. So yeah, is this call here? So now I have to remember what is the configure. Maybe it's better to go over the function again. I think that this object is just a standard. You don't need to create it. It's just a standard object that exists from a part of the code of VisJS, which is this object here. So it's a massive object that contains all the default options for the network. And this is the configure options here. So these options are different than the one in the beginning that it gets passed. And then inside of the create function is going to call this handle object function. And then this handle object function is going to call all these different functions here. And each one of them creates a part of the visualization based on whatever is passed on the path. And the path is going to be an array that contains the levels for this object here. So in the beginning, for example, in physics, which is the one that I was interested, the option here is going to be physics. And this configure is going to be this massive object. So it's going to pass the value of the physics key, which is this stuff here. And then inside of this handle object function, so here is the filter function in the beginning, is this function here that gets passed. And it's used here to see if it's going to show or not the parts of the configure options. So it calls this function. And then inside of here, there's going to be some control flow to see which kind of function is going to be called. And each one of these is going to build a different part of the elements here. So some of them make the inputs, another one make the label, and stuff like that. And I think that the one that decides the logic that is gonna, there's several different ones that decides like what is gonna happen when the input changes here to update the network. And all of them call the same function, which is this me.update, which me is just the instance of the configurator class. And inside of this function is going to call this update function, which calls the parent set options function again, which was the function that got set in the beginning here. So it's kind of like a loop. So after it creates this stuff, it sets an event listener of on change. So for example, in the handle array, it's going to have all of these things here. And then it's going to, this make range is the one that is going to create the range of the input of this input here. And then inside of this function, it calls this one, which is the instance of this function here. And then it sets up the event listers here on change on input. So it's going to call this function every time that the thing changes. And obviously there also calls the make label and make item, which makes the description of each thing here. And then here also there, maybe I can go back. Oh, also this function is recursive because it's gonna go over all of the elements that exist here. So if the item, which is so this object here is this thing here, and the sub object is the key of each one. So the item is gonna become this object here. So if the item is not any of these conditions here, it calls the function recursively. If it matches any of these conditions, it calls it recursively because it's trying to go deeper and deeper into the object, so it gets everything that exists here. Then otherwise, just gonna pass here. So handle array would be one of these, for example. I think, yeah, it is one of these. And the first number is the default value, which is the value that is gonna be here in the beginning. So it's minus 2000 here. Here minus 2000. Then I think this is the minimum. This is the maximum, and this is the step. But this is the stuff that I talked about because here the minimum is minus 30. But if you let go, it allows you to go even more. And this doesn't happen. I tested on the website that I'm building, And if you don't remove and put again the inputs, it just caps it puts a limit at minus 30,000. So I'm not 100% sure if they did this on purpose or if it's just the way that it's supposed to be, because then it allows you to go over, like to go to infinity, minus infinity, if you just keep clicking here. And it's gonna go in minus 30,000, I assume, each time, because it's putting the element here again. Yeah, but here it calls this make range, and then here it calls make label and make item to make the other parts of the thing. And here is the place that in the beginning here as well, it sets up the value of this input to represent the value of the range here, by making them equal. Then it calls this function, and then this constructs the new options based on the value that changed. And then it's going to call the set options with the new options, and the set options is the function that's called in the beginning, which comes from the parent, which initializes in the beginning. But because this time it doesn't have the configuration or whatever key, configure key here, is not gonna initialize the network again, and it's not gonna call this function again. It's just gonna call this one, which sets the options for all the modules again. So it's like each time there is a change here, it reinitializes the whole network, and then with the new options. And then it puts the elements here one more time. It removes them and puts them again. So this is the cycle here. So these are all connected, so not all connected, but most of them use the make label and make item. And then these ones don't have anything else, like they are the final one. Each one of them creates the HTML elements. And then in the beginning as well, on the create function, it calls this clean function on the configurator. This clean here, and this function removes all the things, so it doesn't keep adding them each time. So each time it removes them and adds them again. And goes back here, and then here, these network options are here. So the configure options is the giant object, and then the create function, the handle object function, uses the path, which is going to be the navigation through this object here, by using these network options. So they are connected like that, because this one has a path, and then from the path it gets the configurations from here, and then it updates them based on the inputs there. And then this one is connected through all of the different modules that they use, which are these ones here. So each class that they built has their own options, and then you can set the options as well. And then when you set the options, it changes on the classes here, and then the physics engine is gonna call at each step of the simulation, which is this physics stick here. It calls this physics step, and then this calls the solve for each one of the engines that VisJS has, and then this recalculates everything. And this physics step is done each time on the frame of the visualization. And also, they emit an event on the function. Let me go back there. On the update function, when after setting the options, but the event doesn't do anything as far as I can tell, because I haven't searched for the whole library yet, but I saw in the documentation, and I think because based on the documentation, it doesn't do anything. The only purpose of this event here is so that you can do something when, for example, you can save the options when there's a change. So this is just so if you're using the library, you can put an event listener to this event, and then you could do something every time that there's an update before the options are set again. So I think that's pretty much it. And that's how they do it. And then obviously all the other classes are going to be things that manage the state of the visualization, or solvers and stuff like that, like build the nodes and update the values. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So I'm going to stop here. Just thinking about, see if I forgot something. I think that's it. So.